Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What's New in Prisma, version 3.15.0. Um, in this episode, it's kind of special because it's the first time my colleague and I are hosting it. And let me introduce myself. My name is Alex, and I will be co hosting this stream with my colleague, Tasin. Tasin, how are you?
I'm good, Alex, and thank you. So I'm Tasin. I'm a developer advocate at Prisma, just like Alex, and I will be your co-host.
Awesome, awesome. And Tasin, anything new in your world?
Hmm. Yes, I have been learning a lot about metrics. Spoiler.
Okay. Now I am curious what this has to be about. Wink, wink to the audience. We're just giving a lot of teasers here. So, in my world, there's nothing much new except preparing for Prisma Day. More on that later. And in case anyone has questions as we are presenting or just anything random, feel free to post it in the chat and let us know how you are. Cool. So the agenda for this stream is that we'll first walk through the release notes, and then we'll dive into a demo, which will be on a new preview feature. No more spoilers for now. And then after that, we'll look into a piece of content that Tazin published earlier this week or last week on REST APIs with NestJS and Prisma. And then after that, we'll have a couple of plugs. I think we'll steal this from Syntax. I'm not sure if there's a copyright infringement, but we'll call them shameless plugs. And then finally, in case anyone has any questions, we'll answer them at the end of the stream. Cool. So I think let's get started. I'll add your screen to the stream. And then,
Right.
yep. Cool. So if you zoom in a little bit for visibility. Yep. Cool. So the first improvement that we shipped on Tuesday, or our engineers, is improvement to the Prisma client for data proxy. So the data proxy is a connection management, pooling, and database connection solution that we provide, and it's especially helpful when you're working in a serverless environment. So if you've used the data proxy before with Prisma Client, you've probably used some weird workarounds, especially when generating the Prisma Client. So in this release, you don't have to specify the preview feature flag in your schema. And when you're generating Prisma Client that's specific for the data proxy, all you'd have to do is add the data proxy preview feature flag at the end of the command.
This
And
one.
yes. And if you happen to be running Prisma Client in a Cloudflare worker or Edge environment, we also added, I'm not sure what that to call it, a package, but you can you can use the at Prisma/client/Edge Prisma Client, which is just the same. It's just specific for Cloudflare worker and Edge environments. For the second preview feature that we released, it's a new feature. We call it metrics, and it's a feature that would allow you to monitor how your Prisma client queries interact with your database. And I'll not talk a lot about this because Tazeen has a really cool demo on this. However, if you want to get
Foreshadowing.
started, yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
But if you want to get started with it, all you have to do is specify the preview feature in your Prisma schema, and then regenerate the Prisma client, and then you can use it in your project using under the Prisma $metric method. There's JSON and Prometheus, but I'll let Tazin do the rest. Now, for
Okay.
an interesting feature that we shipped, that is, we'd rather not call it a bug, but it's a feature. Uh,
Okay. Of course.
yes, it's a regression. However, it will be fixed in an upcoming release, either in a couple of hours or
I
by
think
the
it's
end of the
already
week.
out.
Oh, it's
Oh
already
no, it's a
out.
draft.
Not yet.
Oops. Sorry.
Yes,
Spoilers.
no one can see that yet. It's regarding using Azure SQL on macOS environments. It's a regression in that 3.15 doesn't work. However, previous versions do work. Yes. So it's a feature, not a bug, I guess. I don't know. And finally, a tiny improvement is that migrate reset now returns a non-zero exit code, meaning one or any other thing whenever the seed step returns a non-zero exit code. That sounds confusing, but not to worry. In short, if the seeding step fails when you're resetting your database, migrate reset will also return a fail code, if that makes sense. Then we also have a bunch of other issues that we closed in case you're interested in taking a look at them. And that's pretty much it for the release notes. Yeah,
Okay,
and I
lots of
think
them.
a lot of features. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I think let's dive into the metrics demo that you have prepared for us on the stream. Yeah.
Okay, so metrics is this really awesome new feature. And what it does is that it basically exposes a lot of deeper insights into Prisma's performance under the hood. So it exposes things like query response time, how many SQL operations Prisma is running under the hood, the number of active database transactions, what's the state of the Prisma connection pool, and a bunch of other good stuff. So in our documentation for metrics, you can actually find all of the metrics that we expose. It's all over here. And so this is really useful. And the reason this is useful is because a lot of users will come to us with issues like queries taking too long, or them just blowing up their connection pool to the database, like there's too many connections, that kind of stuff. And often it's very hard for people to debug what is exactly going wrong. That's because this information is kind of opaque, it's not readily available. And that's where Matrix comes in. It allows you to monitor Prisma, self
Mm-hmm.
diagnose problems, and also you can connect to various third party monitoring and alerting systems to visualize these metrics and do a bunch of other cool stuff with it. So
Awesome.
that's, yeah, sorry.
Oh, awesome. I'm just commenting that sounds very interesting indeed.
Yeah, it is. And so how do you actually use it? So Alex already talked about that. You just add the meet metrics feature flag, and then you have this dollar metrics API call inside your Prisma client. So
Mm-hmm.
we expose metrics in two different formats, and one of them is JSON. And JSON is fairly straightforward. It's just this big JSON object with lots of metrics and a bunch of data about them. And since you're doing this in JavaScript or TypeScript, you can easily modify this and just mess around with it, convert it to whatever format you need to for your application needs, right? So
Yeah.
this is like a general purpose format. But we also expose data in another format, which is the Prometheus format. So if you don't know what Prometheus is, it's basically a metric system to collect data about your application and do a bunch of cool stuff with it. And we'll get to that in a bit later. But basically, you can expose data in the Prometheus format using this .prometheus endpoint. And this is what it looks like. It's kind of very simple. It's just like a big text file. It has the metric name and some data about it. And what the cool thing about this is that Prometheus, this software, this metric software, it can read this data directly without any kind of modification. So it's super easy to use if you're using Prometheus. And that's actually what we're going to do in a demo. We're going to expose these metrics from an web application that's using Prisma. And then we are going to collect them in Prometheus and then visualize them with another tool called Grafana. So before we do dive into the demo, I want to
Mm-hmm.
give you a quick architecture overview of what we are going to be looking at. So this is what our architecture looks like for the metrics demo. First, we have the web server, and this is using Prisma to connect to a Postgres database. This should be fairly straightforward. This is just a generic Prisma client that's using 3.15, has the metrics API enabled, and this is just a standard Postgres database.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing here is we're using this Express web server to expose the Prometheus metrics using this slash metrics endpoint. And what Prometheus can do is it can collect data from this endpoint. And what it does is it will repeatedly do this after a determined time interval, which is called the scrape interval. We set it to 1 second. So every second, it's going to ping this endpoint, collect data, and store it as a time series, basically the data against the time it was collected at. And after Prometheus stores it, you can query Prometheus using the Prometheus query language, and you can visualize it either using Prometheus UI or other tools. So in this demo, we are going to use something called Grafana, which is very popular for and widely used for visualizing metrics, especially with Prometheus, because the Prometheus UI itself is a bit bare bones. And Grafana can do a lot of cool stuff with this data from Prometheus. So that's kind of an overview of the architecture. So let's just head into the demo.
And just to clarify, it works with the other database providers, right?
Grafana or Prometheus?
The metrics, the preview feature, it works with all.
So
Okay,
you
cool.
can use it with anything, because technically you can just modify the JSON endpoint data into whatever format your metrics collection system is using. But we're using Prometheus for this demo because the Prometheus, well, one, it's very popular, and second, it's very easy to use this API with Prometheus because we have it by default in the Prometheus format.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
So let's get to it. So this is the application, and just to give you a quick overview, this is prom.ts is the Express server we're talking about. And we have Prometheus and Grafana running as Docker containers. And there's not much on those ends except for a few YAML files to just configure it. So Prometheus has a YAML file. Here you can see the scrape interval. This tells it where to collect the data from. It's very standard configurations for Prometheus and Grafana. And we will mainly talk about this Express server, prom.ts. So the Express server has this root endpoint, and this has just all kinds of shenanigans. It's just a bunch of stupid queries that's doing really ridiculous stuff. It's doing like raw queries to put the database to sleep. It's doing transactions and all of it at once. It's just to dump lots of traffic to the database, so it generates lots of data for metrics. And we have two other endpoints. One is /metrics, another is /metrics/JSON. And these are for exposing the metrics in the two formats we mentioned. So one is exposing it in Prometheus, and another is exposing it in JSON. So just to show you what that looks like, this is the metrics endpoint. And this is the JSON endpoint. It's okay. So before we get to the Prometheus Grafana part, we are going to quickly run this script. And what this script is doing, it's using Apache Benchmark to just repeatedly hit this root endpoint. And it's hitting it like furiously, okay? So it's basically going to generate tons of traffic for us, which we can conveniently visualize. So if we do go here, we should see this numbers blowing up. See, you can see everything quickly changing. And now what we're going to do is we're quickly going to go into Grafana, which, if you remember, is reads from the Prometheus server to visualize data. And this is Grafana, and we have a dashboard already prepared for showing us some of these metrics. And if we just quickly refresh it, we can see all these numbers just going to the moon because nothing was happening for quite a while. And then we use the benchmark thing, and it's generating lots of data for us. So what does this data mean? So the first one is active versus idle connections. And what this is showing us is how many active database connections we have, how many idle connections we have, and how many workers in the Prisma engine, which is what talks to the database, is waiting for a connection. So this happens when your database is kind of overloaded. And as you can see, we had lots of idle connections before, but just after I did the Apache thing, now we have lots of workers just waiting for a connection, and the number of idle connections just went to 0. So again, the database is hard at work. And yeah, you can see it in my CPU percentage as well. So yeah, the database is running on my machine too. Anyways, so the next thing is operations versus queries.
Mm-hmm.
So what this is showing us is how many Prisma operations we're executing. So a Prisma operation is something like a find many or a find one or update or upsert or whatever, and how many SQL queries that is generating for us. So if you know a little bit about SQL databases, they use this language called SQL. And basically, Prisma is converting these Prisma queries to SQL queries. And the reason they don't match is because some Prisma queries actually map to more than one SQL query. For example, if you include data, it will do like two queries to get the two models. That's just an example, but there's lots of cases like that. So that's why we can see that the SQL queries and the Prisma operations don't exactly match, and there's a ton of them going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, the last thing is operation elapsed time versus query elapsed time. So again, an operation is what Prisma is doing, and a query is the SQL query. So an operation takes more time than a query because a query is technically part of the operation. So Prisma, when you're doing a find many, it's going to do SQL queries, get the data, transform it into a certain format, do a bunch of other stuff, then give it back to you. So the entire operation itself takes more time than the query. And here we're showing you the 95th percentile of this of the latency. So what that means is 95% of operations in the best case will end within the 23.1 millisecond mark. We are ignoring the worst case 5% because there might be some noise. So like it could be that one or two of the queries are taking like 500 milliseconds just because for whatever unknown variable. So we don't want that kind of data to pollute our number. So that's why we're taking the 95th percentile.
Mm-hmm.
And these dashboards or panels are super easy to set up. We'll actually show you how to do one right now. So we'll add
Okay.
a panel. Okay, so we're going to visualize the number of active transactions that's going on at the moment. So the
Mm-hmm.
metric
There's
for
under
that,
gauges. Yep. There.
yeah, query active transactions. And this is a very, very simple Prometheus query language query. If you just mention the metric, it's going to
Uh-huh.
fetch that. And it's going to fetch that every second, obviously. So let's just run that query. And yeah, it's just visualizing all of those data, the time series of active transactions. So
Cool.
let's give this a label and also give this panel a label. And if I hit apply, we can see this awesome query. Let me just arrange things a bit better. Yeah, okay. So we can see that lots of transactions are happening because that's one of the things that we were doing in
Mm-hmm.
our ridiculous endpoint. So we're running lots of transactions. And so that's why you can see that lots of transactions are happening right now. So visualization is one of the cool things you can do with Prometheus, Grafana.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's also other things. You can set up alerts.
Mm-hmm.
So what you could do is say, I want an alert that will notify me anytime the number of active transactions goes above like 15 or something. So you can set up rules and alerts, and those alerts will get like triggered automatically. So that's another cool thing you can do, but that's not something we'll cover for this demo. Um, yeah, so that's kind of it. That's like what metrics is in a nutshell.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, you can use metrics with other providers as well. We talk about statsd in our docs, and we also give you some boilerplate code to get started with statsd. But it's basically anything. You could set it up with other providers other than these two. You could just use your own custom metric source, whatever you're using, or you could just use it to manually sort of monitor or debug your application. But it's very powerful because of these integrations with other tools.
Mm-hmm.
And in the future, we're definitely going to do more tutorial and content surrounding metrics. And if you'd like to know how to set all of this stuff up, like Prometheus, Grafana, and how to properly use it, you can definitely like check out those content once they become available.
Awesome, awesome, pretty cool stuff. And I think this sort of ties to the whole observability conversation, where, in the words of Charity Majors, I think it's knowing about the trying to know the unknowns, if that makes sense. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The unknowns, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something like that. I know what you're
yeah,
talking about, but I couldn't articulate it either. So I
yeah.
think our audience will have to stay in the dark a little bit.
Yeah, but yeah, I think this will open up, like for the folks who have been interested in knowing how to debug, or just know the performance, it will be pretty helpful. And in
Exactly.
case you're interested in trying out the feature, we encourage you to try it out. It's in preview, but let us know what you think and how we can improve the entire experience with metrics. Yeah,
Exactly. It's super easy to use. You just preview feature and then boom, you have metrics.json. So just try
yeah.
it out.
Awesome, awesome. Also, another question: is it possible to visualize JSON data from the endpoint on Prometheus on Grafana?
Okay, so Grafana is like a
Hmm.
visualization tool. You need
Yeah.
some kind of source for it to get the
Hmm.
data from. So Prometheus is a potential source, TEDSD is a potential source, and I think they have a bunch. It's all listed in their documentation. So
Hmm.
basically, the JSON format is very flexible. It's literally just JSON, right? So you
Hmm.
could convert this into any format you like for your metrics collection software, whatever you're using. So yes, it's the same data as the Prometheus format, so you can absolutely use it with whatever. You just have to do a bit of work to convert it in the appropriate format. So that's actually something we talk about in our documentation as well. So
Hmm.
here's a kind of quick code sample to get the data in JSON format and then make it appropriate for statsd. So
Okay.
again, this is the basic idea, but you can use it with lots of other things as well.
Cool. And Jason Kleinberg has a question. And is it possible to dive into individual queries from Prometheus or the metrics that are generated?
No, it's not. To the best of my understanding, it is not
Hmm.
that granular that you can dive into individual queries.
Hmm.
Um, but you could, I to get a better idea about individual queries, I guess you could log the queries and see the SQL. Maybe use middleware to kind of time the performance.
Ah,
So,
okay.
but I think this endpoint itself might not be appropriate if you want like granular level information about individual queries. But I
Cool.
will still look into this a little bit, maybe just to make sure.
Yeah. I think it's also possible to add open telemetry metrics to Prisma Prisma client, but it's using middleware. There's a certain issue that's out there that's closed that shows how you can do that. I think hopefully we can create content on how to do that soon. And Christian asks, is MongoDB still in beta? No, MongoDB went in GA about 2 releases or 3 releases ago. It's been a while. Yeah, cool. And yeah, Jason says it isn't possible to tie a particular request with a query log. This is something we'll definitely look into to help the whole observability and monitoring sort of experience when using Prisma ORM, definitely.
Yeah,
So
it's a
stay
really
tuned for
good
that.
point, Jason. So thank you for
Yes,
bringing it up.
yes, cool. And now we'll move into the next present. No, I wouldn't call it presentation, but you worked on a
Sneak
piece of
peek.
content on on building a REST API with NestJS that was published last week, Friday, I believe, right?
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
we released this new tutorial
Mm-hmm.
about building a REST API with NestJS. So in this tutorial, you'll learn how to set up a NestJS project integrated with Prisma and Postgres. And
Yeah.
finally, you'll build the REST API itself for this very bare bones blog application. We call it Median, like Medium. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really proud of that name. I tell it every time I'm explaining this. But anyways, so, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll document your REST API with Swagger. So just to give you like a quick idea of what you'll be building if you follow along with this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the what the final API looks like. This is the Swagger documentation page. And what's really cool about this is that it not only documents your API, but it also lets you run different queries. So let me just show you. This is the get articles ID endpoint. So it fetches a specific article, and I'll get the article with ID of 1. And here you have it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the really so this is what Swagger awesome feature number 1, and one of the other cool things that I want to highlight is that you can see like each endpoint has this really well documented return type, the example value, the schema, all of it. So, and I just really want to highlight how easy Swagger is to integrate with NestJS, because I used Swagger before with like Express and there was a lot of boilerplate. I love using Swagger because of like, look, this is really beautiful and awesome, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it was just so much boilerplate. But Nest.js makes it so much easier, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Not to step on any Express fans over here,
I mean,
but
technically, you're still using Express under the
under the
hood.
hood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're all together in this. Yeah. So this
Mm-hmm.
is an article entity, and it's literally just you mentioning that with these decorators that this is an API property, and that's literally all you have to do. And once you use these API property that decorators, if you go to your controller, which is what defines a route, so for example create post, this is the post articles route. So these are all the routes. You just have to mention what the entity type is with these response decorators, and that's literally all you have to do
Mm-hmm.
to get these really, really awesome return types with every one of your endpoints. And this is crazy because this article entity, I don't even have to define it. It's an implementation of this article type,
Mm-hmm.
which is generated automatically by Prisma for me based on the Prisma schema. So
Uh,
all of these tools, they all have this strong emphasis on using TypeScript and type safety. And
mm-hmm.
so like Prisma and SJS, and they all tie really well with each other, and they can enable really powerful things like this awesome auto-completed Swagger stuff. So again, this
Yeah.
is really cool, and you can customize this quite a lot. And you had a question, I think.
Yeah. Let me compose my question again. In case I don't specify like a field, let's say you've added the API property for updated at. So if I exclude that from the entity, will it still be exposed via from the uh, in the Swagger JSON?
Okay, let's try
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
So what happens if you do this? If you take it out,
Mm-hmm.
if we refresh, the server should be ready. Now it's not going to have this title property anymore. See,
Okay.
but there's this caveat here. So let me just
Mm-hmm.
show you. That's in the definition of the OpenAPI spec, but the data itself has title.
Okay.
So this is kind of misleading because title is here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not documented. So this is you shouldn't do it like that. But
Mm-hmm.
what's really mind blowing, let's say you have like this is a user, or you just have some endpoint that you don't want, right? You have like some foobar endpoint and you don't want this. You can basically I forgot what the decorator is, but you can basically omit it using another
Mm-hmm.
decorator. So you can kind of control in your entity what properties you're exposing and what properties you don't want exposed. So a common use case
Okay.
is like a password field.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put that as an omitted field, and if you wrap your return as an article entity,
Mm-hmm.
Nest.js will take care of removing those fields once it returns the data to the end user. So you can
Okay.
use decorators to almost like get very granular field level control. And sorry, I'm really excited. I'm really passionate about this. And
Uh-huh.
this is not something that we show in this tutorial, but we're gonna do another tutorial that shows like stuff like validation and data sanitizing and a bunch of other stuff. And then that's the tutorial that will probably cover some of the things I mentioned about using decorators to control what gets exposed and validate your entity fields and that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that.
Cool. And on the property, on the decorator for hiding, I have limited experience with NestJS, but I also like it because it has an opinion, just like Angular. But I have the feeling it's called API hide property. Maybe we
Maybe
could just
I
try
don't remember these. I just yeah. Let's try it. Let's see if.
API.
Oh wow! Yes,
Yeah,
awesome. So you're correct. That's yeah. That should kind of do it.
yeah. And then does you have to add is it the parenthesis after API property?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. And then if
Um,
we refresh on the
huh. Live coding,
yeah,
fun. Yeah, nope, it's not here. So yeah,
cool, cool. Awesome. And one thing that's not probably talked about a lot is that there are tools that you can wrap around sort of Swagger, which you can use to generate clients, like whether you're building a mobile app or a front end application for the web, basically. I think there's one called Swagger TypeScript API. Point it to a Swagger JSON file, and then it just generates the types for you, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Jason is talking about this as well. You can
Yeah.
basically generate a client from an OpenAPI Swagger file.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, exactly. So if we let me just show you. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the UI for the Swagger docs, but there's also this endpoint, which is API-JSON. And this
Mm-hmm.
is basically a serialization of everything that you see here. And what's cool about this is very portable. So it's kind of like a GraphQL. It's like a GraphQL spec file or a gRPC protobuf. So you
Mm-hmm.
can take that, you can go to your front end, and you can generate a lot of boilerplate. You can generate like TypeScript types if you're using like inside your web apps. Like there's a bunch of these tools in React. There's one in Angular. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I was talking to Mark, who uses Nest.js and Prisma with Angular, just today, and he was
Okay.
talking exactly about this. That he uses this exact sort of workflow, which is super cool. Shout out to Mark if he's watching this. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and it makes end-to-end type safety much easier if that's something you're into.
Yeah. And one other tiny thing that I kind of I just remembered is that you can take the URL to the JSON file, and then you can import it inside Postman, I think, and then it will generate all the endpoints and just the entire playground on Postman, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just this thing is just magic. It does so
Yeah.
much. All
Definitely.
these with a few decorators, so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully maybe we can create content on end-to-end type safety for REST APIs, because I think the most common integrations are mostly with GraphQL and TRPC as well, I think. Yeah.
That's a very good idea. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely something that we can consider doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll definitely look into that.
Cool. And if you're interested in going through the blog post, I've shared the link in the chat. And Tazin goes really in depth into how to do this. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, and we'll have lots of more articles about Nest.js and Prisma in the future. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Cool. And finally, in the last segment of our the What's New in Prisma is our shameless plugs, I guess. Again, a reminder, in case you still have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. So we'll be having Prisma Day next week, just a few days away, and it will be a hybrid event, meaning it will be online for those who are not able to attend in Berlin, and also for folks who will be around Berlin. Feel free to come, give us say hi. I'll be there. I'll be at the reception. You can just come tell me all in case you have any complaints, because that's kind of what we do here. Uh, and on the 15th, I believe we have workshops, which both Tazeen and I will be hosting some. And if you go to the very top of the navigation, I think there's
Oh,
one.
right. Sorry. Oops.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a couple of workshops. There's one by Nico on an introduction to Prisma. I'll also be giving a workshop on database workflows with Prisma, meaning and the content of it will be uh, stuff like getting a better understanding of the Prisma migrate CLI commands and creating a better mental model so that you can use them effectively. And even from development to CI/CD, and then eventually in production, and maybe stuff to do with maybe squashing migrations. And I think you also have a workshop, right?
Oh no. Yes, I do.
Yes. Cool. What could you give a little detail on what you'll be covering, besides
Okay.
what's on the website? Anything that we
Right. Of
should know?
course. So yeah. So it's kind of similar to the article and what we just talked about, but I'll be going through everything step by step. I'll be talking about just random cool things you can do in NestJS and Prisma, and we'll be, since it's a workshop, we'll probably have a bit of time to cover more than the article covers. So we'll maybe go into some of these other topics like validation,
Hmm.
maybe error handling, and a bunch of other cool things, based on how much we can cover basically. So it'll be a lot of fun. Definitely check it out.
Cool. And for Nico's and I's workshop, they'll be at the office. So in case you also want to learn in person, we'll be here. But in case you won't be able to join, they'll be remote as well on Zoom. Tazin's and Chance's workshop will also be hosted online. Yeah,
Yeah, so we
cool.
won't be there unfortunately, but you should definitely come.
Definitely. Yeah. And we also have a pretty extensive lineup of talks. If you could go to the talks, I think those are the speakers, the lineup of speakers.
Oh, sorry, talks, right?
Yeah, maybe we could improve the navigation, but yeah, it's a little too late. So are there any specific talks that you're excited for?
I am actually looking forward to a bunch of them. I'm looking forward to Soren's keynote.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to this one by Jesse, which will talk about like structuring data in MongoDB land.
Mm-hmm.
And another one that I'm really looking forward to is one by Alberto, which talks about the Prisma VS Code extension. And also this one, Redwood and Prisma, make front-end developers full stack, which also is really about how Prisma and a lot of these cool tools that Redwood uses makes end-to-end type safety and a lot of other cool features possible.
Cool, cool. I'm mostly excited for the Pothos and Prisma workshop by Michael Hayes. We had him on what's new in Prisma 3.11, I believe.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think Pothos is pretty exciting, even though it's a competitor to Nexus, which we
Oh,
built. Uh,
yeah, Potos
I
is
think,
awesome in my
yeah,
opinion. No worries.
yeah.
I think
So, yeah,
it was called something else before, and it was kind of
Jurassic
similar to,
World,
yeah,
I
something
think.
like that. It had a really
Yeah.
zany name. I like that name better, but I think they had like it was so confusing that people mess it up with other tools.
Yeah. The other one is a talk by Liz Van Dijk. Dij. I hope I'm saying her name right. She's from Planet Scale on developer-owned databases and New Frontier. Seems very exciting. And finally, the talk by Alexandra from Flight Control or Blitz on SQL.
But yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping to learn something new. I'm sure it's stuff that I don't know yet. Yeah. So come say hi, come interact with us, meet the engineers behind the ORM and the data proxy or the Prisma data platform, and it will be pretty fun. And I think there'll be an after party which you shouldn't miss out on. Yeah.
You definitely don't miss out on that.
Yeah.
And even if you can't come in person, definitely join remotely. Everything
Hmm.
will be available online, especially the workshops, which are just all remotely available. You can do them from your house or wherever. So whatever works for you, just attend. That's the main message here.
Yes. Yeah. Finally, I forgot about this, but we also published a migration guide from Mongoose to Prisma, which is in the Prisma docs. So, in case you're using MongoDB or Mongoose, uh, I, I worked on this guide showing you how you can incrementally sort of adopt Prisma in your project. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's I went through it and it's really cool. And one of the nice things is you can do an incremental adoption, so it's not that you have to change everything right away, which is often very difficult for large applications.
Yeah.
So definitely something worth checking out if you're using Mongoose and or considering Prisma.
And of course, the disclaimer when you're migrating is that you have to have a database with data, otherwise that there isn't any migration. Because MongoDB doesn't really have a schema under the hood. Yeah, cool. So we have one question from the chat from Jasper. Do we have any improvements to Prisma client in a serverless setup without the Prisma data proxy? Not completely, but I think a release ago we improved the connection pooling, I believe. I'm not sure if we have any other updates, um, but hopefully we can. This is something we'll definitely look into. You can create a discussion and let us know your thoughts. Yeah, and that
Yeah,
should be pretty
definitely
much it.
just go to GitHub issues if there's a feature that you're interested in getting implemented. Talk about
Hmm.
it. If there's already an issue about it, like comment, do like emojis, just interact. And we're super active on GitHub, and we try to prioritize features based on interest. So definitely make yourself heard.
Cool. And as for Daniel Dennis, see you at the reception. He's a friend. We've interacted with him in a couple of times in Kenya, more than a couple of times, I'd say. Yeah. And finally, Jason, the sessions will be available online afterwards, but we will take some time before we cut the videos into individual sessions and upload them. Yeah. And that should be pretty much it. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you if you're attending Prisma Day. We'll see you there. And till the next What's in Prisma. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.